Good day there, Wealth Press viewers, subscribers, investors, and traders. Happy New Year to everybody, and welcome to our first Monday morning roundtable of 2021. I'm joined, as usual, by Jeff Zananiri, Jeff Yasteen, Roger Scott. Gentlemen, how are we today?
Excellent.
Doing well. Happy New Year.
Excellent. Roger, I'm going to start with you because you and I had a bit of a webinar on the 29th, and we gave away one of your bonus picks, and it's up 70% on the option a mere 72 hours later. Tell us what's driving that and how does that relate to general market conditions right now?
One of the reasons it's up is because metals are up. Look at gold today. That FCX is a copper stock. Jeff Zananiri has mentioned it several times, as a matter of fact, during our conversations here and our previous conversations. But that's been one of my strongest relative strength stocks now for 3 or 4 months. And it's also one of the best ways to take advantage of the copper market, as we've talked numerous times here. And right now, gold is I don't know if you guys looked this morning. Gold is making a nice move. I'm hoping it'll get to 1970. If it gets to 1970, I think we're going to have a breakout to the upside again on the April contract. But that's the reason why. It's a sympathy play. There's a strong correlation right now between the metals, and with the stock market being a little softer, a lot of uncertainty with COVID increasing right now, I think that metals may be a good place to be. And if you remember, James, both Jeff Z and I, we did not completely write off gold in 2020. We were very bullish on it. And Jeff, please correct me if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I was personally very bullish on it first half of 2020. Then I became kind of neutral. Then the mining stocks still stayed near high. So I did not write off gold. I went from being super bullish to neutral, but not bearish. And as a matter of fact, a few days ago, before the New Year's, I even said, watch out for 1970. If gold makes a run to 1970, there's a good chance it's going to break and test the highs again. Also, there's a very important factor here. And this is very important. If you look at the last 50 years, precious metals, they've only rallied five or six times. But when they do rally, they tend to make they don't just make little blips. They tend to really make long-term moves that sustain themselves over a couple of year periods. So it's not unusual for gold to behave the way it's behaving right now. So that is the underlying reason I believe that the stock is moving. But more importantly, I think gold has another chance to make a big move in 2021, which is the bigger issue here.
Sure. Jeff Z, you went long gold, as I recall. I believe it was in October. And I'm wondering how that trade worked out for you. And if you could color that with what is driving this jump in the gold price today.
Yeah, I traded gold bullishly in the miners like 3 times in 2020. And I am a little bit taken back by how strong this move is today, but it's what I would call a pathfinder, because it's outsized its normal range on a daily move basis for the last 90 days. It really sticks out, and it's breaking out to the upside. So that FCX was an awesome trade. That's great that you gave that to those guys. That chart looks fantastic, by the way. It's nice and steady. It's not really parabolic yet, but it looks like it's about to be. All of this has been done on what's for me like the most central real story of what's driving everything right now, which is the dollar. The dollar is breaking down. I don't know if you guys trade Bitcoin, watch Bitcoin or whatever, but Bitcoin went to 30,000 while people were, celebrating Christmas Eve and New Year's, and like markets aren't even open. And this thing was up 10% every day for like a week. And that's all part of this story of, and James, I know this is near and dear to your heart, the destruction of fiat currency, the pump and dump scam that central banks have been perpetrating on the planet has accelerated and gotten more brazen in its scope. And all of this bodes well for gold in the future. I think there's still adults in the room and sober people that don't necessarily want to have a large stake in Bitcoin and other places, because frankly, it's very erratic and it's very volatile, but they want a way to protect themselves against the destruction that's happening in their currency holdings.
Sure, you bet. Jeff, yeah, seen the price of gold or price of Bitcoin actually touched, I believe it was 34,000 before it dramatically broke down to 27,000 last night. And I'm curious as to your opinion as to the relationship between today's spike in the gold price and yesterday's breakdown in the Bitcoin price. Is there a relationship, and what does it mean?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a one-for-one relationship, but I'm glad you asked that question because I have no problem with Bitcoin at all. It's been a huge run. Anything that goes up, you want to own that, especially in this kind of environment with nascent inflationary trends and fiat currencies and all the rest. My concern with Bitcoin, and then as it relates to gold, is this. It seems like pretty much every hedge fund, anybody who has serious money is into Bitcoin in a gigantic way. And if there's anything I know, it's that usually when every institutional operation out there gets into any one particular asset, chances are it's somewhere near the end of its run in terms of having been lifted to parabolic levels. So my thought here is that if at some point we continue to see the dollar degrade, we may see a run out of Bitcoin. If only 10, 20%, maybe what we saw today or this over the early morning hours is part of that, as where what hasn't already been moved sharply higher yet. I think gold is it. So I'm not saying they both can't move higher together. But at this point, I would be looking to maybe shift out of Bitcoin if it was a one-for-one deal, get out of Bitcoin and then move into gold, because gold is still the one that hasn't made the huge liftoff. And I think this year, as everybody else has said here, this year especially is going to be a huge one, I think, for gold stocks and gold juniors in particular. And I said, back, I don't know, a month or so ago, I talked about Hecla and Yamana as two that I'd gotten into. There's a couple others. And again, I think that all of those are going to have huge, strong runs, not just for the next week or next month, but over the next year and coming years.
Sure. Coming back to you, Roger, on the Bitcoin question, 3 weeks ago, Scott Minerd, who's the head of the Guggenheim Global investment outfit, he goes long Bitcoin and then goes on CNBC and says Bitcoin's going to $400,000. And that's the kind of institutional collaborative conspiracy that drives asset prices higher. When big institutional guys with airplay go long and then predict some outlandish price, bringing in a new stampede of retail suckers, as I like to think of them. Is this the near-term top for Bitcoin in your opinion? And is gold the better play, as Jeff Y was suggesting?
Well, yeah, I think, well, I do believe there is some degree of negative correlation between Bitcoin and gold, but I don't think I don't think it's as strong as the US dollar. I think maybe if you were to put a number on it, I think that the US dollar is influencing Bitcoin maybe, and gold influencing Bitcoin by maybe a factor of 35%, maybe 40% most. I don't think it's a negative correlation to like taking the Nasdaq and the Dow Jones and inversing one. I don't want to get carried away with that. Okay, we're not there yet. If it was, it would be close to a conspiracy theory, and I'm not gonna say that because I just don't see it. But there is some influence. Unquestionable. Here's my belief. I believe Bitcoin is going to. I believe this year we're going to see some more developments between traditional e-commerce merchants, for example, like Square and PayPal and Bitcoin. I actually thought Amazon was going to be the first one. I was wrong. It happened to be PayPal. But nonetheless, Bitcoins are becoming a traditional form of payment. Now, I think Bitcoin is still in a very, 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 very premature stage. I've compared Bitcoin to American Online 1993. I think we're still kind of making heads or tails with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I think ultimately, when we look back 10 years from now and we look at Bitcoin, it's going to be like the catalyst that started other creations, inventions. I think the federal government's going to get on cryptos. I think other stores and Amazon, which is going to be massive, is going to get on cryptos. I think they may make their own crypto, which has been the rumor out there for a very long time. But the bottom line is the way I look at cryptocurrencies is I'm taking extremely long-term fundamental approach, because I simply don't think the technology, the privacy, and what it will end up being is there right now. So again, to me, that's a technology that's still in the extreme baby stage of growth. Like I said, internet 1993.
Yeah.
But I think the relationship between US dollar and gold, the inverse relationship, is very, very strong. So I'm neutral on cryptocurrencies while I am becoming increasingly bullish on gold. So I wouldn't do a pair trade between gold and cryptos. That's just to be clear. But I am bullish in gold. I think 2021 is going to be a good year for gold. I think gold. I never gave up on gold. I think that the fact that miners continue to trade near all-time highs is a very strong sign, and the fact that we're seeing such strong volatility to the upside from gold, especially in light of the fact that the U.S. stock market is not in a pinch just yet, is also a bullish sign. Typically, when a market is dying off, when it's becoming bearish, you won't see such strong, as Jeff Z said, pathfinder type. I think that's the term you used. Those type of catalysts to the upside, and we're definitely seeing it. And again, as I'd like to remind everybody, we've only had, I believe, 5 major trends in gold over the last 50 years, which leads me to believe that these trends are a lot longer. They're not the typical, crypto trades that could last 6 weeks or 8 weeks and then, sucker a bunch of people in, come back down. This could actually be a meaningful long-term trend based on fundamentals. So I kind of wouldn't mix gold in with cryptos a full on just yet. Okay. And yes, I think gold is going to be I think a lot more traders are going to be looking at gold because of of where the US dollar is. And it's just, it's terrible. It's in a terrible place right now. So that would answer that question.
Okay, so Jeff Z, as you had noted, crypto is near and dear to my heart as it pertains to gold. And the fundamental flaw, the fatal flaw that I perceive in Bitcoin, which I believe is overlooked by most of the participants in the bull market in Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin seeks to become its own sovereign currency without sovereign backing. That is the fundamental flaw that is overlooked, and the market doesn't care because speculative dollar for dollar, it's making money hand over fist. The volatility is huge. So guys on the short side, guys on the long side, great. I don't care. Bitcoin can be Bitcoin. But the central banks of the developed world are getting ready to launch central bank digital currencies, which are de facto sovereign currencies digitized. So my question is that maybe what's driving the skepticism in Bitcoin? And should we be more focused on central bank digital currencies and their ability to influence gold in terms of their debasement, because it doesn't have the mathematical restriction on debasement that Bitcoin purports to, though that's also certainly up for debate. So the long-winded, wacky, tangential question I'm trying to throw at you here this morning is the advent of Bitcoin and central bank digital currencies the major driver in the price of gold today, but as well tomorrow? And we haven't seen anything yet in gold.
I think at the end of the day, gold has something that Bitcoin has the opposite of, which is history and pedigree and tradition, and it's universally known as money. And the way that Roger described it is spot on, with Bitcoin being in this infancy of trying to establish itself. Like, it's just now starting to be taken by PayPal as a payment. I've been investing in Bitcoin. I've been trying to use Bitcoin. I've been trying to pay for stuff with Bitcoin for many years, just because I like to, deal online with things. And it's not so simple. And there's a huge slippage. And the bid-ask spread is like you could drive a truck through it. And the volatility is another thing. So it's not a store of wealth. It's very difficult to use as a currency because, you know, you need a little bit of a steadiness when you're trying to pay somebody with something. You don't want a 10% swing. Oh, I'm going to pay you on Monday for mowing my lawn. You're going to get some Bitcoins. Well, if it's 32,000, it's a lot different than if it's 27,000, isn't it? So that's a problem, right? I have a central issue with the fact that it can be replicated by central governments. It can be banned by central governments. And the biggest thing is they don't own it. They don't own it. Banks own gold still. Countries own gold. They don't own Bitcoin, right? So it's like you want your book to appreciate it. And if you start to feel like something is a rival to your own book and you have the power to destroy it, you just might do that, which makes me a little bit nervous about the long-term future game. What's happening with the price of Bitcoin right now is very simple. It's a manufactured scarcity. So a lot of big institutional holders of Bitcoin are taking that inventory of Bitcoin out of the trading system. So if you look at what trades on Coinbase, for instance, which is a huge exchange, every day Bitcoins are being taken out of Coinbase, out of the circulation. So if you have this constant decrease of supply on purpose, manufactured, and you have this like interest to the steady, you're getting this phenomenon. But it makes me really nervous because I know there's going to be some serious volatile. I think the long-term game could be excellent. I'm not going to just sit here and bash Bitcoin because it could be 200,000 in 5 years or whatever. But at the same point in time, you got to expect 50% shakeouts. You have 10% rounding errors on this thing. So you have everything is proportional. A 10% drawdown in a stock that has half the volatility of the S&P is a big one. If you have 10% daily ranges, then a real pullback in the asset is going to be a 50%er. So there's going to be people that buy this thing at 30,000 with the potential of waking up to it at 15,000. You just have to recognize that that's the nature of this asset at this point in time.
Right. Okay, Jeff, why? What's your overall take on Bitcoin as it pertains to your universe? And I mean, what are the chances? I mean, it goes from 34 to 27 on a weekend. What's to stop it from going from 27 to 1,000 in a week?
I don't know about getting down to 1,000 in a week. I mean, that's pretty catastrophic. Although, you know, like we saw with what was the name of that other currency, Ripple, which I think the SEC has now said is a security. There was some, I just know from the headlines, there was a thing with the SEC having problems with Ripple, and Ripple overnight fell 30%. So this goes to, you know, what both Jeff C. and Roger have said regarding it just being a sort of new type of asset that still has its training wheels, if I can put it that way. I think over my main point, going back to what I was saying earlier, was mainly that when you have so many hedge funds involved, it's like you know, they're putting their thumb on the scale, so to speak, and that's why we see Bitcoin, you know, at least the other, you know, a handful of hours ago at 34 or whatever it was. And that's why if they need, as they've taken those Bitcoins out of circulation, increase the price, if at some point they need to get liquid on, you know, because they have redemptions and those sorts of things, what are they going to sell? I think they're going to sell Bitcoin and probably not sell gold. And, you know, that would bring Bitcoin back down to, let's say, 15,000 or something like that. And that's where everybody comes back in again. The same way we've seen with gold over the past, you know, couple of years. It goes on a huge run, pulls back, and then sets up for the next stage. I think the overall parameters here, it's still, you know, inflation, I think, and just printing up money. And, you know, we have to just keep that as the view of the forest, so to speak, and not get so worried about, you know, which trees are falling in which direction.
Yeah, interesting too. To Jeff's point, Jeff Z's point about, you know, a government being able to cancel the validity of a competing monetary unit, and the example of Ripple, who has effectively been canceled through legal means.
Yes.
And you know, so for me, that Ripple was the number 3 cryptocurrency. So for that to be so easily put into a place where, I mean, when you're trying to be money, the most important thing is the integrity of the money. And a grand jury challenge that, you know, your money is a security and it's not money is just all the example you need. So when I say crypto could go from 27 to 1,000 to even less than 1,000, we only need to look at the examples of companies that have traded in that range and gone on to go to zero with all of their founders and CEOs imprisoned, to look at the risks and the possibilities of what's happening in Bitcoin. Now, that's my position. I hold a alternative viewpoint as it pertains to Bitcoin. That's fine. It's a difference of opinion that makes a market. So Roger, to your point, to Jeff's point, to Jeff and Jeff's point, in the longer term,
F squared.
yeah, in the longer term, is Bitcoin more of a risk than it is an opportunity?
In my opinion, it is, and I'm still treating. Okay. My view of Bitcoin has not changed in the last 5 years. It's the only change is maybe starting now because of PayPal and Square. But my point is this, without anyone here having to read between the lines, I would treat Bitcoin like I would treat a penny stock. Yeah. That's simple. Not a small cap stock, a penny stock. I would put, if somebody asked me, hey, should you put this in my portfolio? I would say, buy a couple of shares, put 2% or 1%, treat it like it's a complete speculative play. That's how I would treat any type of cryptocurrency. Again, I have a very, very specific view of it. I don't even know for certain, James, if the ultimate impact of cryptos is going to be used as a trading vehicle or more of a financial transaction banking style thing over the next 15, 20 years when it's all said and done. So I'm still very uncertain about the future of cryptos in terms of what it's really worth and the financial value. And I think Jeff Z really, it's not based on a intrinsic value like gold. You can't touch it. You can't lift it. You can't, it's maybe I'm too old, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I like to be able to touch the money, feel it, kind of know what's going on behind it. And we're just not there. Now, in terms of the technological benefits of it, I think it's amazing. I love it. But in terms of the trading aspect of it, that's where I have a problem with it. So I want to make sure everybody understands it. I'm not throwing away I think it's going to be one of the biggest game changers over the next 30, 40, 50 years. But how, in what way that's where the issue lies. So again, I'm not throwing away the baby with the bathwater. I think cryptos are going to have a huge impact of how we live our lives down the road. But right now, as far as a trading vehicle, very speculative, penny stock equivalent, gambling type of mentality. That's my personal opinion.
Sure. Okay, let's come back to the original origin of our discussion was when you made advised, or you gave a suggestion that FCX was going to be a near-term outperformer. And here it is, 72 hours later, and it's up 70%. Freeport-McMoRan, the stock that underlies that symbol, is one of the world's largest miners of gold, copper, and molybdenum, particularly copper. And so does the spike in the price of gold have more to do with the spike in the price, or rather the incremental rise in the price of copper consistently over the last quarter than it does to do with Bitcoin? And is that indicative of some other greater trend for 2021, Jeff Z?
I think that Bitcoin is more correlated to, like Roger said, penny stocks. I would liken Bitcoin to what's happening in NIO more than I would to Freeport-McMoRan, who's pulling copper and the industrial economic metal out of the ground that is highly tethered to the actual economy in the real world. I think that the less tethered you are to the real world, the more beautiful imagination you can have, like Willy Wonka with Bitcoin. And the fact that we have the kind of just like pumping of money out there and just like loose monetary conditions and people just manufacturing ways to make a boatload of money in a short period of time is what's happening with Bitcoin. Whereas with copper, I think you're starting to see, you have that aspect of the destruction of fiat and it being priced in dollars, but you also have the aspect of the economy in Asia rebounding sharply, China in particular. And so they're different things. I think Roger nailed it when he's like, you know, you don't put on a long short Bitcoin, gold. Their correlation is spurious at best. People like to get into like dueling piano contests about them. They should be really more evaluated in terms of their volatility statistical analysis rather than a macro viewpoint of where they fit into the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jeff Y., let's wrap it up here with consolidate all of these viewpoints for us from your perspective. And, you know, so Bitcoin's, you know, it's an opportunistic, speculative, emerging something. It wants to be money. It can't be money without sovereign backing. That's not relevant to those who are trading it for a profit. And gold, in the meantime, is breaking out for reasons then that we have determined is not necessarily related to the breakdown in Bitcoin, but to greater macroeconomic issues or greater macro monetary issues like the debasement of US currency every time the stimulus checks go out for $900 or $600 or $2,000. To me, that strikes me as a great discrepancy, which might be having an influence on the price of gold. But then so, you know, and then we've got copper stocks like FCX who are outperforming, directly correlated to the economic recovery in Asia and Southeast Asia in particular, whereas in the Northern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere, the general economic conditions are more characterized by recession. And so what's the positioning for 2021 in that perspective? There's so much opportunity fraught with so much risk.
Jim, I think you wrapped it up really well right there. Look, I guess the way I put it is I try not to get too involved in thinking about the intricacies of you know, fiat currency and all the rest, because after a while it just makes my head hurt. And instead think about like what's like super popular and everybody wants to own. All right, like I was dropping my son off at school today, and he was telling me about a friend of his whose dad is a doctor, surgeon, and talking about all the money he made owning Bitcoin. Or as I saw on a news headline over the weekend about some rookie pro athlete who just signed a contract and apparently had part, or maybe it was all of his contract denominated in Bitcoin instead of dollars. And it's sort of like when we see that kind of thing, we all know in this roundtable instinctively, oh man, it just sounds super popular. What's not popular to own? Gold. I mean, if I say gold to my son, he'd be like, "Oh, Dad, that's so old school. Everybody has to have Bitcoin." And you know, to me, that's like, where would I want to put my money? I want to put my money in gold, which is the asset that hasn't had the big run yet, versus Bitcoin, regardless of whether it's, you know, a currency and all the rest of it. Bitcoin's already had its run, or let's say most of its run. As where gold, I think, is just beginning that liftoff phase, which we can stay with for a long period of time. To me, that's the one thing. I just want to buy stuff that's going up and keep circulating to find that early in that process.
You bet. All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there for this week. Thank you very much for your input as usual, intriguing discussion as usual, and I look forward to speaking with each of you individually during the week. Have a fantastic week, and thanks for joining us, everyone.